Hi, my name is Jasmine, and in today's video, I'm going to bring you to the Jerusalem Archaeological Center, or the Davidson Center. This is a splendid archaeological park near the Western Wall with findings from different periods. So let's begin our visit. Adjacent to the Western Wall lies an impressive archaeological park. The park contains artifacts from different periods: the First and Second Temple periods, the Byzantine Muslim period, the Ancient Crusaders period, and others. The most exciting findings are the city walls from the First Temple period, the steps leading up to the temple, the original street from the time of the Second Temple period, shops, ritual baths, and more. The Davidson Center is a museum within the archaeological park with presentations and exhibitions related to findings from the site. You can watch a video about the pilgrims that will bring you back in time. Also, a virtual model with a local guide will take you on a journey in time to the Second Temple days. There are many names for this site. Some call it Davidson Center, and other names it Ophel Archaeological Garden, Jerusalem Archaeological Park, or simply Archaeological Park. Second Temple Period Complex and Herodian Street along the Western Wall. In this video, you will see the Herodian Street from the Second Temple period. On the left side street, there are an array of stores. At the end of the 1st century BCE, King Herod rebuilt the Second Temple and made it into an edifice of great splendor. It was destroyed in the year 70 CE when the Roman legions under Titus, son of Emperor Vespasian, crushed the 5-year-long revolt of the Jews against Rome and conquered Jerusalem. The foundations of the massive retaining walls built by Herod to create the podium on which the temple stood are visible to this day. The best-known section is the Western Wall, the venerated remnant of the temple where Jews pray to this day. Excavations were begun during the 1970s along the southwestern corner of the Herodian Temple Mount enclosure. Remains of structures from many periods covering 2,000 years of history were uncovered from the destruction layer from the Second Temple period. From 1993 to 1997, new excavations were conducted between the Western Wall and the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount. After removing the debris of later periods, the Herodian Street running along the western wall of the Temple Mount was exposed in its full length. It followed the course of the Tyropian Valley between the Temple Mount and the Western Hill, where the upper city, the quarter of the well-to-do in the Herodian period, was located. It is today's Jewish and Armenian quarters. The street was uncovered for a total length of 70 meters, about 10 meters wide. Vertic stones carefully trimmed and joined together for comfortable walking. On both sides, the street is bounded with elevated carved stones, and beneath it is an impressive network of drains, the lowest of them covered with stone vaults high enough to walk in. Between the street and the western wall of the Temple Mount, a row of small shops that opened into the street was found. Evidence of the commerce that once took place here is provided by many stone wraiths of different sizes that were found in this area. The base of a massive arch protrudes from the western wall, some 12 meters north of the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount enclosure. It is known as the Robinson's Ark, after the American explorer who identified it in the mid-19th century as part of the Herodian construction. Opposite it, some 13 meters from the western wall, the remains of a pier that supported the other end of Robinson's Ark were exposed. The pier is constructed of large ashlars similar to those of the Herodian walls of the Temple Mount. It contains 4 cells like those in the row of shops on the opposite side of the street. Meeting place cornerstone. It's a large cornerstone with a typical Herodian profile had been found during the 1970s lying in the street below The southwestern corner of the Temple Mount, a Hebrew inscription partially preserved on the stone, is carved. To the trumpeting place, to the most likely reconstruction of the missing ending of the inscription is proclaimed or separate. The stone had stood at the top of the western south corner of the Temple Mount, from where the temple priest announced the onset of the Sabbath on Friday evenings. The great piles of fallen stones provide dramatic evidence of the destruction wrought by the Roman legions in Jerusalem in 70 CE, with Josephus Flavius described in great detail. Some of the stones which covered the street were removed, and the site was open to visitors who can walk on the original pavement on the street from the Second Temple period and follow on the footsteps of the throngs of pilgrims who walked here 1,000 years ago on their way to participate in the rituals on the Temple Mount. Robinson's Ark. Near the southwestern corner of the western wall, you can find the Robinson's Arch. Robinson's Arch is the name given to a monumental staircase carried by an unusually wide stone arch, which once stood at the Temple Mount's southwestern corner. It was built as part of the Second Temple expansion, initiated by Herod the Great at the end of the 1st century BCE. Recent findings suggest that it may not have been completed until at least 20 years after his death. The massive stone span was constructed along with the retaining walls of the Temple Mount. It carried traffic from the ancient Jerusalem's lower market area and over the Tyropaion Street to the Royal Stoa complex on the esplanade of the Mount. The overpass was destroyed during the Great Jewish Revolt only a few decades after its completion. The arch is named after biblical scholar Edward Robinson, who identified its remnants in 1838. Robinson published his findings in his landmark work, Biblical Researcher in Palestine, which he draws a connection with the bridge described in Josephus' Antiquities of the Jews in the Jewish War, concluding that its existence proves the antiquity of the walls of Jerusalem. Excavations during the second half of the 20th century revealed its purpose and the extent of its associated structures. Today, the considerable surviving portions of the ancient overpass complex will be viewed by the public, with the Jerusalem Archaeological Park, as it is adjacent to Jerusalem's Western Wall worship area portion used by some groups as a place of prayer. Early Muslim period complex. The main in this complex is the Umayyad Palace, so let's visit it. Umayyad Administration Center and Palaces. As you saw, there is a wall between the Umayyad Palace and Ophel Archaeological Garden. If you climb up to the wall towards the Crusader period watchtower and look back at the Jewish quarter, you will see the view. The conquest of Jerusalem by the Arab army in 638 was the beginning of an important era in the city's long history. The new ruler of the Umayyad dynasty aimed at changing the character of the city from Byzantine Christian city of many churches to a Muslim religious center and the administrative seat for a subdivision of their empire. They restored the breach walls of the Temple Mount and built two impressive sanctuaries on it, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The two Hulda gates of the Second Temple period in the southern wall of the Temple Mount was restored in order to provide the faithful with easy access to the Haram's esplanade. The facade of the western of the two gates, the double gate, is preserved, and the carved stone archway dating to this period is still visible. In excavations carried out in the 1970s, south and southwest of the Temple Mount, the names of the remains of 6 massive buildings were uncovered. Not known previously, they were an administrative center of the Umayyad government. The area south of the Temple Mount, which had sloped southwards, which, leveled by earth, fills a large building's foundation which entirely covered the Byzantine structures below. The result was a flat surface upon which buildings were constructed, intersected by paved streets. Clay pipes were inserted into the stones of the Temple Mount wall to provide running water from the main aqueduct along the restored Wilson Arc on the western wall. Rainwater was channeled into large cisterns beneath the buildings, and an extensive drainage system was installed. The Islamic administrative center included palaces and other buildings which have been only partially uncovered. The palaces were similar in plan. A central courtyard surrounded by many rooms. Other structures known as pillared buildings had large stone paved courtyards with rows of square pilasters supporting the roofs. The largest and most impressive palace near the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount was excavated completely. It was the seat of the Umayyad Caliph whenever he visited Jerusalem. This palace measures 96 by 84 meters and is surrounded by a 3-meter thick protective wall constructed of large trimmed stones, mainly in secondary use from the collapsed Herodian walls of the Temple Mount. Two main gates, one facing east and one facing west, give access to the palace. A broad stone paved courtyard in the center of the building was surrounded by rows of columns supporting the roofing of the porticos. Many of the columns came from Byzantine churches, as evidenced by traces of engraved crosses on them. The rooms around and central courtyard were paved with small stone slabs and mosaic. Plaster decorated with geometric design and floral motifs covered with exceptionally thick walls. A bridge was built from the roof of this palace to the Haram, providing direct access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Ophel Mikveh Trail passes through excavated remnants of various structures. Signs along the trail explain archaeological features, historical background, and Jewish law. The sign portrays the nature of the ritual baths and their place in Jewish society during the Second Temple period, when this area was on the pilgrim's route to the Temple Mount. As you can see, there are signs in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Step mikveh. There is a set of rules which has to be obeyed to make the mikveh ritually valid. Those rules include: it has to be connected to the ground, it had to contain a minimum of 40 seah of water. Seah is a biblical unit of volume measurement. We are not sure exactly how much it was, but according to my check, it was about 10 liters. The water could not be drawn or conveyed by vessels from anywhere. The mikveh had to be spacious enough for one to immerse the entire body at once. Following those rules, the mikveh was usually rock-cut with broad steps and plastered walls. Since mikveh is unique to Jewish people, archaeologists know it was a Jewish settlement when they find one. Step mikveh. The mikvaot in this area were used by pilgrims who immersed before they ascended through the Holy Gates to the Temple Mount. After the destruction of the Second Temple, Jews were banned from Jerusalem. Non-Jewish inhabitants used the mikvaot as cisterns, storerooms, and quarries. Since there were tens of thousands of pilgrims in Jerusalem beyond mikvaot, water supply infrastructure was required. Many cisterns and mikvaot are based on rainwater. The Byzantine complex. The wall that you can see in front of you hides many secrets. And when were completed, Ophel Mikveh Trail went under the wall of the Byzantine complex. This complex in the Archaeological Garden shows a Byzantine Christian neighborhood remains whose inhabitants lived on the ruins of a Jewish Second Temple period neighborhood. It was densely built at the end of the 4th century in the eastern part of the Ophel and included churches, a monastery, a hostel, workshops, shops, and residences. The finds are rich in mosaic floors, some of which have geometric decorations. This neighborhood appeared to have been demolished with the Persian occupation in 614 AD and was not restored. Here we pop out the other side of the wall, and you can find there a Byzantine house with many rooms from the 6th century BC. The builders used remains of earlier structures. The floors were covered by simple mosaics and ceilings made from planks of wood. Ophel Archaeological Garden. The Ophel is a biblical name for a particular part of a city. In the Bible, Ophel is mentioned in the context of two cities, Samaria and Jerusalem. The origin of the word from the roof is an AFL in several Semitic languages and means uplifting or condescending. The height of the Ophel may explain in the context from the scripts, which indicates that the Ophel was a fortified and protected area that served as an inner fortress for the king and the king's administrations. Ophel in Jerusalem. The Ophel refers to a long, narrow hill beyond the Temple Mount's southern edge. The entire area is lower than the Temple Mount and must be mounted from there. The Ophel is bounded on the west by the central Gai Valley, on the south by Gai Ben Hinnom, and by the Kidron River on the east. The hill of the city of David, which is ancient seat of Jerusalem, lies in southern Ophel. The common opinion in the study is that the city expanded to include the Ophel in King Solomon's time, which built the temple on the Temple Mount. During the return of Zion, subjects settled in the Ophel area are to be close to the temple where they served. Mikveh is the Jewish ritual bath. The Second Temple period mikveh was created in an earlier rock quarry. In the middle of the staircase is a small rock cut barrier that symbolically marks the boundary between those descending to ritually purify themselves and those emerging purified according to Jewish laws. Palace of the Umayyad Caliphate was constructed following the Muslim conquest in 638 CE and was part of the Islamic administrative complex in Jerusalem. The huge threshold of stones still convey a sense of the regal splendor. Visible are the niches that held the bolts of the huge doors. The cypress trees marks the extent of the central courtyard. At the beginning of the 8th century CE, during the reign of the Caliph Walid I, this palace was constructed. Many of its stones were salvaged ones fallen from the Temple Mount walls, from where the visitor can ascend to an impressive observation point in the old city wall promenade. Byzantine building, a Byzantine period dwelling over which the Umayyad Palace was constructed. The walls and ceiling of the rooms have been reconstructed and plastered, utilizing Byzantine construction techniques. Staircase of the gates. We are standing upon the staircase leading to the gates in the southern wall of the Temple Mount. At the top of the staircase were two gates, the double gate and the triple gate. Thousands making pilgrimage ascended these stairs to the Temple Mount from the city of David below and from the profane to the sacred. As described in the Mishnah Midot, all who enter the Temple Mount would enter by the right circle and exit the left way, except for one who would circle from the left. One who had suffered an incident refers to someone who has suffered bereavement and merits consolation from those present. Set is a double arch gate, the double gate, and the stern is a triple arch gate, the triple gate. There still are a few Herodian architectural elements visible outside and inside the gates, while most everything else of what we see today is later Muslim period work. Southwestern corner of the Temple Mount is approximately 500 meters long, making this the largest temple precinct in antiquity. It is thought to have stood to a height of 48 massive stone courses. 8 of these courses of stone lay beneath the surface of resting upon bedrock, and 40 scores stood above the surface. The stones of the wall were laid without mortar. In the upper third of the wall, one can observe the springing of Robinson's Ark, which is supported the upper flight of stairs that connected the city with the Temple Mount. Above it stood one of the gates of the Temple Mount. The impressive sewage channel passes below the street and rainwater into the Kidron Valley to the south of the city of David. The trumpeting place stone, this huge stone was hurled 40 meters down from atop the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount by the Romans, who destroyed the temple upon it stood the trumpeter who proclaimed the coming of the Sabbath. The contemporary historian Flavius Josephus described it thus: the place where one of the priests stood on the eve of every Sabbath and blew the trumpet as a sign that the Sabbath was approaching, and as he did on the eve of the following day. The former instructed the people can cease all labor, and the second to return to their chores. The niche carved at the bottom of the stones beneath the inscription is the place upon which the trumpeter stood. The fragmentary inscription reads, "To the trumpeting place 2. Pier and shops at the Robinson's Arch. The impressively preserved shops were used for selling products and money changing. They were built into the base of the arch that supported a staircase leading upward to the Temple Mount. Next to the western wall were found remains of 22 other shops. The inscriptions reading, "And when you see this, your heart shall rejoice." The quote derived from the book of Isaiah 66:14 is engraved upon a stone in the western wall. Some believe it dates to the 4th century, while others maintain it was inscribed in medieval period. Stone collapse. The collapse of stones about a small portion of the stones that were hurled down from the walls of the Temple Mount as part of the systematic destruction by the Roman conquerors. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy this video. I'm inviting you to please share my video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.